right. Hello, Dublin. Hi. I'm very happy to be back. I'm Ewa. I'm an engineer here at Google. And as an engineer, I like to look at things from slightly more technical perspective. And that usually means starting with some data. So just to get some basic data, how many of you heard about progressive web apps? A lot of people. OK. So who thinks implementing progressive web app is easy and straightforward? OK, we have some work to be done here. And who thinks it's super complicated and difficult? Well, I have mixed feelings. That's why I'm saying. OK, hopefully today I can shed some light on it and make you understand this concept a little bit better and maybe guide you a little bit in how you can change your current websites into progressive web apps if this is what your business is needing. So where do progressive web apps come from? They come from the love of the web. And I love web because it's very open, it's free, and it's very easy to enter this market. Everybody can make their mark on the web. It's also very discoverable. That's why users like it so much. Everything is just one click away, so it's easy to use. And that means that the reach of the web is really enormous. It works on all kinds of devices and all kinds of browsers. Currently, we have around 5 billion devices connected, and this number is growing steadily. And this rich aspect of the web is also what makes the businesses love web so much, right? As a matter of fact, 53% of retail time, which means making money, happens on the web as opposed to apps, right? So you can see that in the mobile retail space, the web is sharing the space with the apps. So sometimes we start to think, where should we invest? In our mobile presence or in our native app presence when it comes to mobile especially? Well, the apps are very interesting, and they allow for very rich engagement patterns with the users. But there are a few problems. A typical user uses only 3 top apps on their phone. This means that it's very hard to get to this exclusive club if you have a long tail type of business and you're not like one of the 3 most favorite apps for the given user. It's hard to enter that space. And the average user actually installs 0 apps per month, right? So it's very hard to get users to install your app. That's why businesses are interested in making a real presence in the web, because it's so much easier to get user attention over there. But web has issues, and we've all encountered those, and you've seen them in the previous presentations as well. You all encounter death by spinner. That's how I call the first issue, right? When you rather die than wait for the content to load. There are scrolling issues where you can't really scroll because there are so many items on the page, they don't load properly. Or this feeling when you try to click on something on the mobile page and it just jumps away, this favorite game a lot of websites make us play, right? Or the dinosaur when you don't have internet connection because, for example, as I do, you live in Switzerland and you don't have cheap roaming in EU or anything cheap for that matter. So all this can be pretty frustrating, right? And you don't want that. You don't want to frustrate your users because frustrated users don't buy stuff. And you usually want your users to buy stuff. So instead, you want them to be blissful and delighted and have pleasure from using your service. You see, there's a difference, right? Like frustrated user, delighted user. I mean, I know they're both shouting, but I hope you can see the slight difference between these 2 pictures, right? And progressive web apps give you exactly that, guide you in the process on how to delight your users on the web. So it's not so much a technology or an API. It's really a mindset on how to build the sites. And the idea for progressive web apps was quite simple. Historically speaking, mobile had this amazing reach, but in terms of engagement, it didn't have the same capabilities as a native app. So what progressive web apps try to do is to lift the mobile web app so that they keep the very extensive reach and ease of use of the web, while bringing the engagement on par or exceeding the one of native apps. Because you always want to be in the sweet spot on the top right corner. So it's not a technology, not an API, but a mental model of building the apps that deliver a radically improved user experience while keeping the reach of the website. So in order to organize this mental model in our head, we like to use the FIRE acronym. FIRE as in like blazing fire, not to fire someone, you know. And it stands for fast, integrated, reliable, and engaging. Fast means the apps needs to be fast, because otherwise your user gets frustrated. Integrated means that doesn't matter which device or type of device the user is using, they should feel at home while using it. If they're on mobile, it should behave according to all of the ergonomics of the mobile world. If they're on desktop, it should make use of all the capabilities of a desktop. So it should really feel like something that belongs there and is not just a guest visitor. Reliable means you can use it in different circumstances. For example, it should not rely on the network connectivity. It should just work because it's kind of on your device rather than in the network. And engaging means you should leverage the patterns that make your user focused on the task they're trying to accomplish in the app, and that make it easy for them and a pleasant experience. So I'll show you an example of a progressive web app. This is Starbucks PWA. Who goes to Starbucks for coffee? Yeah, a lot of people. So you can use now a PWA for that. They recently went through a redesign, and their primary goal here was to establish the same type of experience both on the established and on the emerging markets. And on the emerging markets, because PWA from their nature are work on offline first perspective, they're really great for this type of markets where the connectivity might be not so reliable. And it's also great for people on the go. And people like that use public transport or underground and so on usually want their coffee on the go, and they want to be able to order one. So they invested in a progressive web app. Their web app is fast. It loads really fast. They're leveraging the patterns that, for example, Luke showed you, the loading screens, where you load the skeleton screen and only then load more content. They're caching content on the device, which means it's accessible really quickly without the need to go to the network, and the navigations are really snappy. They are integrated, which means you can install it on the phone. We call it add to home screen. What it does, it shows a prompt to the user, and they can install it on their device and get an icon on the home screen. But it's not only that. It also installs it as if it was a native app, which means they can find it in settings or in the list of all the apps on the device. So it feels integrated into the phone. It's also using the credential management API that Andre showed you yesterday to make it very easy to manage account setting up. It's reliable because it works offline, and even in store, if you don't have a network in the store, you can still use the app to, for example, collect points for a free coffee or something like that. So they really enabled all of their business model to support this. And finally, it's engaging. They use a lot of small features, small improvements. They allow a lot of customization to make this a really delightful experience for the user, and also to make them accomplish their task in the most easy way possible. This brought really good results for Starbucks PWA. Their active user base rose twofold compared to the previous website experience. Their number of orders is growing week to week by 12%. So that's a remarkable growth in terms of this app. And the final version of the app was much, much smaller. Like, really, the final version of the app was a fraction of the original file size for the iOS app, which means many more people can actually afford it to download it and to use it on their phone without sacrificing the space. So let's say you want to have a similar experience for your users. You say, OK, this Starbucks app is pretty cool. Let's have a similar thing in our business. So how can you go around it? Well, we have this very handy and fascinating progressive web app checklist. And as also list is very exciting. I mean, boring, right? It's just a long list of things you should consider implementing in order to improve your user's experience radically on the site. But it's very kind of difficult to navigate. It's just a long list. So let me break it down for you a little bit. We talked about fast, integrated, reliable experience mindset in progressive web apps, right? So how about I move it to the top, and I add one thing, PWA readiness, and I'll touch on that in a moment, right? So PWA readiness is about preparing your website before you embark on this journey for the progressiveness. This means that you need a proper, decent website before you start adding progressive web app features. If you don't fix some basic problems with your site, adding those progressive features will just make things so much more complicated. So first, you need to ensure that your site works cross-browser, that it's responsive, that it works on different devices, and that its performance is acceptable. If you try to integrate features like offline, push notifications, and so on a website that doesn't work properly or is not performant, you will just frustrate your users even more. So before you even start thinking about progressive web app journey, fix your basic things first. Next thing is security. That's the most important things when you try to add new APIs. Being secure is really important for your users. You're going to do business with them. You're going to accept payments. You're going to use all new APIs that require security. So HTTPS is the next step to consider when going towards progressive web app. Once you have HTTPS, you can look into Service Worker. And Service Worker is really a breakthrough in the web industry. Before, a page was always communicating with the server directly, and you couldn't really control this network connectivity so granularly. With Service Worker, you get a proxy. You get a piece of software that stands between your front end and your backend server that can control your network connectivity. This means you can do cool stuff like caching stuff for later use on the client so that your app doesn't even need to go to your backend to get the data they need. You can prepare data ahead of time, even before the user asks for it, because you can later on, thanks to caching, store it in Service Worker, and so on and so on. A lot of APIs depend on the Service Worker, so that's your base technology to get right before you implement other features. And once you have that, you can go and look into all possible features that you can implement. And there is a big variety. I listed only some basic ones. Service Worker can improve your performance even more, so you can push it even more. It can allow you to implement offline behavior for your app, which means once your user has it on their phone, it works offline for them. Add to home screen. You've seen it in the Starbucks case. It allows user to add it to the home screen and to the whole system on their phone so that they can access it wherever they want to deal with your website without remembering fiddly URLs. It allows to send push notifications to the users, which means you can notify users of some important developments, just as the natives app can do. It also enables you to add credentials management or payments, all the cool stuff that Andrei was telling you yesterday. So a lot of features are available to you. Now, because it might be a little bit difficult to navigate those features, I wanted to share with you how I go around implementing some of those in some of the apps I work on. So the core is to have a process. And you might think, well, it's a very simple process of how to get from website to progressive web app. Of course, you first need to think and analyze what's the situation. Then you need to set some priorities, then gather your tools, then actually do implementation and then measure. But you would be surprised how many times in your teams or in your companies not everybody agrees on this process, or it's not made clear for all people involved what the process is going to be like. So having an established process helps with that. So let's dive deep a little bit in here. First step is to analyze. You need to really understand the current situation of your website, what are the weak spots, what are the strong spots, and how to build on top of that. So for this reason, we prepared a tool for all of you. It's Lighthouse. It's accessible in the Chrome DevTools for those of you that are on the more technical part of site, but it's also a Chrome extension. So pretty much everyone can have an easy access to that. You just install the extension in Chrome, go to your website, and push the extension button. And what it gives you is this type of report. It pretty much runs a set, it's over 100 right now, audits on your website, and analyzes all the possible things. On top, you get scores in 5 different categories. It tells you how performant is your app in terms of speed, how many progressive features you've implemented. It lets you know how you're doing with accessibility. It shows you some best practices that you should be following, and it also gives you a score on your SEO, which is very important for businesses. So these top-level scores give you an overview of what's happening with your page, and they also can create a nice milestones for your team, right? You generate this report, your starting point, you can communicate it with higher-level stakeholders, and then give this report also to your team to dig deeper into what is below. And below, you get more details on those scores, but also, like this section at the bottom is called, I don't know if you can see from far away, it's called opportunities. So it pretty much lists all the stuff you can do on your website that will make it better and closer to the progressive web app. And what is cool, it does not only tell you the name of the opportunity, it also gives you a description and a link to documentation. So if you give this to your technical teams, they can just go through the report, click on the links, and learn all the stuff they need to know in order to implement this stuff. So it's a very, very useful tool. Now, one feature that I want to call out is this very little button in the top right corner with the share sign on it. So when you click there, you can actually export this report to different formats. You can save it as JSON, but you can also save it as PDF. So I would encourage you to run it on a regular basis on your business apps and save the reports for later. It allows you to track the progress throughout the development and also see how you're doing within 1 month's time or 2 months' time, right? There are more tools that we offer apart from Lighthouse, and sometimes it might be very difficult to navigate through them and figure out which one is supporting what analyzes or which one is suitable to perform the task. So we prepared an overview for you so that it's easier for you to navigate when to use which tool. And it's called Speed Tools Overview, and you can find this at this URL. OK, so let's say you analyzed your website, you prepared the report, you saved it in a safe spot because you want to refer to that later. And now you're ready to prioritize, because most of the time in business, you don't have time or money to do everything in one go. So remember, there were many features possible, and it might seem almost impossible to implement all of them immediately. So here's what you can do about it. First, start with the basics, with the stuff that does not give you immediate progressive web app status, but is critical to your business. Why? Well, because Craig said so yesterday, right? I mean, remember yesterday, optimize or die. So you just have to do it. Well, the second reason is that he's actually right, 79% of shoppers who abandon your site because it's not performant enough or not responsive will never come back. That's the sad stats, right? And when it comes to conversion rate, I mean, we're at the conversion conference, 1 second delay in how performant your site is can cause you up to 7% drop in conversion. So it's really, money is involved there. So make sure it works cross-browser, make sure it's responsive, works on different kinds of devices, and that the performance is at least acceptable. And remember that actually Lighthouse allows you to do that to test on different network connections. Don't test, while you're at work on your LAN speed or broadband speed. Test on 3G, test on 2G type of network on a low-end device to have a really performant website. Next, as I said, security is a must. So don't even think twice about, OK, what do I do next? Just do HTTPS. Move to HTTPS if you didn't do that yet, and only take it from there. Then set up service worker as a base, and I'm going to show you some tools that can help you with that. And then there are these many features, right? And how to implement them all in one go? Well, the good news is that progressive web apps is a modular concept. You don't need to do it all in one go. Depending on your business, on your user model, and on your goals, you might go iteratively about it and just choose one feature at a time that you want to focus on. If you have a lot of users on 3G or Li-Fi, just like Starbucks did, well, maybe first thing you should optimize is offline experience. And it also, offline doesn't mean that the app works offline only. It also means that if the connection is intermittent, like, I don't know, on London Tube, you still get a decent performance. And sometimes it's a really critical user base for you. You care about user retention? Well, maybe add to home screen, and push notifications are a way to, once you acquire the user, keep them coming back to your app, because it's just one tap away. It's on their home screen, so they might be coming back. Or push notifications, if they're relevant to the user, they might bring them back into your app. If you care about brand loyalty, if you want to create this loyal user experience across different devices, you might think about implementing credentials management. And if you care about conversions, maybe payments will help you in this regard. So just always tie it back to your business goal, because it's not so much about checking all the boxes on the progressive web app checklist. It's about your users and about your businesses. So once you set priorities, you know what you want to do, you need to get the proper tools. And there's a lot of libraries and frameworks out there. So here I just want to call out one library. It's Workbox. This library allows you to implement offline experience and caching, both for offline and for improved page speed, in much easier way. Out of all the features I listed on the overview, getting offline right is probably the most fiddly one. It's really a lot of manual work if you try to do it yourself, mostly because the web works on URL by URL basis. So pretty much with every URL on your web app, you need to figure out what to do with it. Pre-cache, cache at runtime, a lot of different possibilities. Workbox really makes it easier for you. So it's a good starting point if you plan to implement offline experience. So that's a really useful tool for you. Once you collected your tools, you know what kind of supporting libraries you want to use and so on, it's time to implement stuff, right? And let's say you have your set of features, you decided which ones you want to do. Now, it's very easy to over-focus on the features, while you should be focusing on the user. So it's not enough to implement add to home screen or implement push notifications in the easiest possible way. You need to do it in a way that delights your user, which means on top of all these features, you need to put UX first. If you implement those features, but you do it in a way that actually discourages the user, it will bring more harm to your business than advantage. So for example, if you implement notifications, only send what is relevant and personal to the user. Don't send random stuff, because then it turns just into one more advertising channel. And in terms of notifications, it's very easy for the user to say block and never, ever send me anything again from that website. So sending random notifications can actually harm you more than sending relevant ones. It's the same case for permissions. Don't ask the user straight away when they enter your page for permissions to use geolocation or even add to home screen thing. Only show it when the engagement is high enough and when they might need it. For example, in the Starbucks app, when I try to order coffee and I'm about to say which shop I want to pick it up from, that's when it asks, well, can I use your geolocation? Then I can tell you more about which shops are available in your vicinity. Doing it in context really improves conversion in this situation. really invest in perceived performance. Luke said a lot of things about that in the presso, so I won't repeat that. There's a lot of techniques you could be using. He was talking about skeleton screens when you load the general structure of your content first and only then lazy load the rest. You should pay attention to things like unstable load. By unstable load, I mean when you try to click something and it jumps away because some other big picture or ad was loaded in the meantime. If you just set dimensions of your things right on the page, you can make sure that the things stay where they were first rendered and they don't move around just because more stuff came in from the network. Smooth scroll. If you have a very long list of products of any type of rows, really, you can use virtualized lists, which means only the items that are currently on the screen are rendered, and others are being fetched and rendered on demand. And you can also investigate more advanced patterns like PRPL or upshell, and for this, I sent you to documentation. You've seen a lot of stats about performance, but there are never too many stats about performance, so here you get some more. Just remember the last one. Drop-in conversion is about 7% due to 1 second delay. So it really costs you money to have a slow website. Last but not least, when it comes to shaping the user experience in the progressive web app, just try to remove friction. Find all the places where the user can, be slowed down or needs to perform a task that you personally don't like to perform, and just make it easier. Single tap sign-on, as Andre explained yesterday, helps with that. Payment request API, where the payment details are collected automatically for you, can help with that. Using autocomplete on your form fields can help with that. So always put the user first and think about where they can encounter problems by using your website, and fix those things for them. Last but not least, we sometimes forget about this part, but you need to evaluate your results. And there are many ways of evaluating. You can set different metrics to do that. So I just want to call out a few tools that can do that for you. And generally, we think about them in two categories. There is lab data, and there is field data. By lab data, I mean when you test your website on your own machine in your own company, and you can figure out what happened. So for example, if you save that report from the beginning of the transition process from Lighthouse, you can also run it at the end of the process and see the difference, right? See where metrics improved, maybe some regressed, right? So you want to keep an eye on that. DevTools for your technical teams also allow them to have some insight into that. Field data means you don't measure stuff as you are using it. You measure what your actual users are doing it. And you're all familiar with analytics, right? So you know how to use analytics to see what your users are doing on your websites. But there is one more thing I wanted to call out. It's Chrome UX Report. It's a pretty new thing. We just announced it at Google I/O. And it actually analyzes a broad spectrum of users and measures how their experience on the web for most common URLs were, and gives you the results as a big BigQuery interface, which means you can go into Chrome UX Report and really slice and dice the data and, for example, figure out how your website looks like when compared to the industry or when compared to this vertical. So it really gives you an idea, for example, if you want to launch on a new market, like how this market is doing. Maybe my website works great in Germany. How it's going to work in Poland, right? This is all available thanks to Chrome UX Report. So that's the whole process from analysis to evaluation. I hope it gives some clarity of how to approach that. Make sure that you always communicate your version. That's just one of the versions of the process. So you need to communicate your version of that process to your team so that everybody is on the same page. And as I said, you can approach it in a modular and iterative way. So it's not just an linear process. After you evaluate, this final evaluation can make a nice starting point for the new iteration on your work. And this way, you can work on one feature at a time and also have a good insight into how it's affecting your user base. If you want to learn more, we're just after a Google I/O event in California. There are 2 videos. The first one is about web performance, so it's about this first part of progressive web app readiness that you can look into. And the second one is strictly about progressive web app experiences, so you can find more information there. Thank you so much.